Hey everyone, and welcome to a bonus episode of the Digital Pub Club. This time we're calling it the Cheese and Beer Club. The reasons will become pretty evident pretty quickly. There is an elephant in the room, or rather a cheese writer. They end up the same thing in the end. Please say hi in the comments to Ned Palmer, one of the great cheese experts of the UK, maybe the world. Although he doesn't know what cheese comes from Texas. We'll get into that too.
I know nothing about Texas.
Thank you so much for joining us for the Big Cheese Weekender, all in a bid to remind people of the amazing quality of British cheese, and of course to match it with the amazing quality of incredible beers that we have here on this Emerald Isle. I hope you enjoyed the Queen's speech. It's not going to be anywhere near as good as ours. And Brad's got a monologue for the end of the show, primed and waiting for you. Brad's going with it. He's like, yeah, I'll come up with something.
Always. Never been a problem.
I hope the appropriately regal, Brad.
That is one of the words I would use to describe.
Apparently, not to go off on one, but apparently I am slightly related to royalty.
Bullshit.
Brad, everyone is, if you go back.
The Admiralty. Apparently I'm related to the Napoleonic era admiral.
Yeah, everyone is.
Irish, Scottish, Welsh.
Yeah.
Norwegian. You.
All the rest of it. Yeah.
I'm not buying it anymore, Brad. I'm not buying any of your slightly funky cheese.
Kaiser Soze.
Guys, so before we get stuck into the cheese and beer matching, please do let us know where you're from, what you're drinking, and what you're eating cheese-wise, or just generally, in the comments. We'll do our best to keep up with them as they come in. And let us know if you've got any questions for Ned or for me or for Brad, maybe the other nationalities he hasn't mentioned yet. And we'll get to them as soon as we can. The format for tonight is we will be choosing a cheese. We will then be matching it with the beers that we've selected. Hopefully about 10, 15 of you do have the beer box and have hopefully gathered cheese as well. So you'll be drinking and eating along. Everyone else, grab your nearest cheese. Somebody said that all they've got is grated cheddar.
Fine.
It can work.
I've done that when I've been very drunk. You know, you get back from the pub, just diving into a bag of pre-grated cheddar.
That's an insight into Brad's life there. So Ned, let's start. Tell us a little bit about yourself for our followers that don't know, and then tell us what cheeses you brought.
Okay, so I call myself a freelance cheesemonger, and I think I will have to tell you what that means because I think I invented it. So what I do for a living is talk about cheese, and it is the best job in the world because that involves eating cheese, visiting cheesemakers, drinking beer, wine, various other drinks, and matching them together. I recently wrote a book. I'm just going to stand up. So I call myself a freelance cheesemonger, and I think I will have to tell you what that means because I think I invented it. So what I do for a living is talk about cheese, and it is the best job in the world because that involves eating cheese, visiting cheesemakers, drinking beer, wine, various other drinks, and matching them together. I recently wrote a book. I'm just going to stand up. So I call myself a freelance cheesemonger.
Ned, come back towards the speaker, mate. You sound like a robot. Where's he gone? Oh, he's back.
All right. So that was weird because I just heard everything I just said.
Oh.
Yeah,
anyway, here's my book. It's called A Cheesemonger's History of the British Isles. So now you know what it's about. Right, should we talk about cheese then?
Yes, let's get cheesy.
Yeah. So there's a way to taste cheese. Now, when you're on your own in your homes with your cheese, you can do anything you like with it. But when you're with me, there's a way to taste cheese, and we're going to do it properly. So I will also, to save time, demonstrate cutting the cheese. Here is our first cheese, the Coat Hill White. Brad has a lovely knife. You don't need special knives for all this. This is a shortish, quite sharp knife. This will do absolutely perfectly for this. So you want to cut nice, even pie slices. There we go. That's the cheese. So what I'm going to do is cut it in half first, and then I can cut nice, neat pie slices out of it.
I've already gone wrong
in the center and cut a little kind of pie slice. So now that you all know how to cut a cheese,
Oh,
we'll
look at
be
you
conscious.
presenting it, Johnny.
Sorry?
Johnny's presenting it on his blade.
Oh, look, he's much
Very sexy.
more elegant. Oh, look at that. Lovely, Johnny. Well done. So I've cut a little, see how I've done a little triangle there?
Nice.
You've done
So
this before,
the
man.
thing to do is to observe your cheese, to look at your cheese. And what we see from this is that it's a fresh young cheese with no rind at all. Very young, probably just a few days old. Brad, have you already eaten some?
No, I'm just
I should say, guys, if you did buy the box, you can start with our first beer by cracking to the
Sorry, should we pour some beer first?
Don't crack into cheese yet, like Brad has done, but do crack on with your Keller pills.
I'm going to have some beer.
No, I haven't eaten it yet, Ned. I was just smelling it. It smells
good,
fresh.
Well, Brad has moved. So firstly, we look at the cheese. We see that this is a young, fresh cheese because it's got no rind on it. It's just pure cheese. The next thing to do is to smell your cheese. Lovely glass, Johnny. Now, in the wine business, they talk about nosing, but in the cheese business, we're less pretentious, so we just say smell it. Because aroma is a huge part of flavor. So by smelling it, we're already tasting it in a way. So I get some acidity, milkiness. Think about that as you're smelling it. Think about the texture. This is a soft cheese, so it should be soft. I give it a bit of a squeeze, and I feel it's slightly giving, and it's got a nice moisture. By the way, you can only squeeze your own cheese. Don't go and squeeze other people's cheeses. Like, if you were to go into a shop and squeeze cheese that wasn't yours, people would be upset with you.
You'd be arrested.
Yeah, at least. There's probably medieval punishments for squeezing cheese that isn't yours. So anyway, we've moved from the looking and the touching and the smelling to the eating. So when you eat your cheese, which you may all now do, and I'm going to do mine in a minute so I can talk, but Brad, eat. That'd be great.
Oh, wait, I need it.
Think about the narrative structure of flavor. The cheese is telling you a story. There's the first flavor as you first taste it. As it starts to warm in your mouth, the flavors are developing, you're getting more of the complexity. And then as you finish that morsel of cheese, think about the finish. So a good cheese should have length. And you get these cheeses in supermarkets, they've got numbers on them, strength 11 or something. It's like Spinal Tap. All the numbers go to 11. It might be very strong, but there will be no length. No finish. With a good cheese, even something simple and mild like this, you'll get length and finish. So as you eat it, think about that narrative structure, that the development of flavor, and also think about that finish. So that's how to taste cheese.
The narrative of cheese tasting. There you go.
Cheese. I'm going to eat some cheese now.
So Ned's going to quickly eat some cheese. I'm going to quickly go over, just in case you're new to beer, a very quick guide of how to taste beer, like the beer judges do when they're judging beer. It's a very similar format to tasting cheese. You start by getting the aroma. The best way to get the aroma is a thing called the bloodhound technique. So if you ever watch a dog on the trail of an aroma, it's not just going like it's doing a line of Coke. What it's actually doing is it's taking short, sharp sniffs and exhaling each time. And that's because your nose is actually better at sensing changes in aroma than it is just straight up aroma. So if you exhale each time, you're going to get another hit. So that's what you do. You give the beer a swirl, and that breaks up the aromatic compounds. Like Brad's doing, you can put your hand over the top. Make sure before you sniff, you remove your hand fully, or else you're just going to smell your hand. And then you put your nose in and give it 3 short, sharp sniffs. And you'll get different flavors. So from the Keller pills, I'm getting lemon, maybe some brioche, some dry sort of white bread, something a little bit spicy as well.
I get honey. I get honey.
Honey. Yep.
Yeah, which I've never had from a lager before. It's fascinating.
So a great German lager will have some honey notes coming from the malt. This is a northern German Pilsner style, so it's a little bit more bitter, a little bit more hoppy, but you should always get with a German lager a real kind of acacia honey, floral honey kind of vibe, which you wouldn't get so much from a Bohemian Pilsner, where it'd be more about the caramel, a bit more sort of sweet depth. Then obviously you taste it. So you'll swill it again. You'll take that sip. You'll get enough in your mouth to coat but not float your tongue. And then when you swallow, the really important thing to do is to breathe back out. And then you'll get a load more aromas and flavors, and that's called the retronasal appreciation.
Retronasal, yeah. Nice.
There you go. Got it in cheese too. And hopefully that's going to give you a little guide of how to get the best from beer. I could have given you the full beer judging technique, but life's too short and your beer's flat by the end. So we'll stick with the Bloodhound.
I just want to say that's absolutely marvellous beer, Johnny. Well done.
Good, thank you.
And Brad.
Always with a lager.
I never noticed that much honey in a lager before. It's amazing. And funnily enough, for a fresh cheese like this, honey would be something you would do. You know, with a fresh cheese, to have some honey, some walnuts, or something. So we're on to a winner already with this pairing.
There you go. There you go. Right. So I'm going to dive into the comments. We'll take some questions, and then once we're done, we will get stuck into the first cheese. So questions. Where are we? Is Ned a time traveler?
Am I a what? Sorry?
A time traveler. I'm trying to think what that's referencing. Who invented the triangle, Ned or Dairy Lee?
It wasn't me.
Wasn't you. Not guilty.
No, it wasn't me. I didn't do that. I have so much to say about that. Nothing wrong with the Dairy Lee triangle. Nothing wrong with that at all.
I agree. Stick it on toast and it's all great.
Yeah. Marvellous.
Thomas Open, I feel modern haze bombs, so like those hazy, juicy IPAs, difficult to match with cheese. What would work? You're right. They're almost impossible to match with cheese. I
would go.
What would you do with so there's no bitterness. There's loads of sweet, jammy mango, papaya.
Yeah, well, that sounds just glorious to me, and I would absolutely match that with cheese. In fact, I would match it with something like the Cotil that we're about to try.
Right.
With all that sweetness, you maybe want some acidity to contrast with sweetness. And with the young fresh cheeses, you get that acidity. No, I think that would be marvelous. You talked about jam and that. I like having fresh goat's cheese with raspberry jam.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think that
you're right. Like a really a tart fresh goat's cheese is probably the best thing to go for.
Absolutely.
I have tried that pairing and it still doesn't quite work because I think although it smells sweet, it's actually maybe not that sweet on the palate.
Yeah.
It's a real tricky one. It's a bit like sort of a dessert wine and cheese can be a bit tricky.
Yeah. I use dessert wine a lot for blue cheeses and wash wines. Blue cheese and dessert wine is fantastic. Right, but what is interesting is that dessert wine only goes with certain families of cheese that are more intense. And if you, for example, try dessert wine with a cheddar, it won't work so much. We could talk about. So I have some principles for matching cheese and booze, and they're quite simple, I think. And you probably know them already, but the main principle is about matching intensity. So that if you have a very delicate cheese and you have a massive, well, say one of those juicy, hazy beers, it wouldn't work because the massive intensity of the beer would wipe out the cheese. So you want to balance intensity. That's one thing. And you do that by this is not my invention. This is from a sommelier friend of mine who said, have both the cheese and the wine, hold them in your mouth for 15 seconds. He was adamant that it had to be 15 seconds.
Because 14, you just...
13 bad, 18 too much, 15 seconds. I never wait that long. I can't be asked. Can you still taste both things? If you can, then there are, matching of their intensity. So that would be the main principle. Then there's contrast, which is, you have something sweet with something sour. And then there's complementary, where you have something floral with something floral. So there are three principles that you can apply, whatever you know about list. You don't need to be an expert. I mean, the other thing is what you like and what you enjoy. And I mean, I'm perfectly happy if you want to match WKD blue with a Dairy Lee triangle. I won't do it myself, and I probably won't come to your house. But you know, sorry, Johnny, sorry. But those would be my principles: match intensity, contrast, or complement.
Or the Radiohead principle.
What's that?
The Radiohead principle.
What's that?
It's the 2 + 2 = 5.
Yeah. The third flavour.
The third flavour.
Well, I don't think of that so much as a principle, but more of a happy accident and a joyful thing. That when you get a flavour that wasn't in the cheese or the beer, we call it the third flavour. That's a magical moment. And I don't seek it. I don't try and find it. It just happens sometimes. I also think
you can use it as a principle. Like one of the things I used to love about black IPAs, for those beer geeks out there who miss the black IPA, so a roasty malt base and a really hoppy, citrusy hop top note. You used to be able to create what was kind of like grilled pineapple flavors by having roasty character and citrus. And that was an example of two things coming together and suggesting something that wasn't actually there.
That's lovely. I'm also seeing, just there's a question in my comments here, what beer would you recommend to drink the generous portion of Lincolnshire Poacher? Which is funny because Lincolnshire Poacher can have a pineapple note to it. So that was just a lovely moment.
I also saw somebody ask, what would you match with Mills Clump?
With what?
Mills Clump?
What's that?
I'm assuming it's a cheese. Just having Mills Clump. Oh, sorry, Mills. Mills is the brewery. Oh, Johnny. You must have been a geek.
Oh, thank God. I thought there was a cheese I'd never heard of. I thought
it was, I haven't heard of Clump by Mills. I haven't had that beer. So
I've just got to say that Andy Topham has pointed out that blue WKD is matched with Babybel, of course, and he's totally right.
James suggested, he'd asked, what's the best beer pairing with cheese strings?
Jesus.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not actually...
Corona.
Right, guys, let's we'll come back to some comments because there's also one around Babybel I feel I need to address. But let's get stuck into the first cheese and beer match for those who have the case and the cheeses. So we're going to move along from the Keller Pills and move on to our first match, which is Coates Hill White and Kutch. Do you like the emojis? Like, I think they're pretty.
I do love the emojis. That doesn't really look like Coates Hill White, though, Johnny, does it?
No, it
looks like a sort of cartoon Tom and Jerry holy cheese.
Holes in it for a start.
When we branded the craft beer channel black and yellow, we never really thought about the fact that cheese is yellow. And beer, beer is also yellow. Yeah, we fucked that. Yeah. Still, it looks great, Brad.
Yeah,
it looks awesome.
Yeah, shades of yellow.
Right, so Ned, this whole event that we're doing is about supporting independent cheese makers in Britain or indeed around the world.
Absolutely, yeah.
Sing the praises of Coates Hill White to me.
So it's made by the Davenport family on their family farm in Lincolnshire, and they make a whole bunch of cheeses, including one called Yellow Belly, because apparently, I never knew this before, Lincolnshire people are known as Yellow Bellies.
Yellow Bellies, yeah.
I've never tried this Coates Hill White before tonight, and I absolutely love it. So it's a very simple fresh cheese. This is like the Ur cheese. You get milk, you add some starter culture, that sours the milk, you add some rennet to coagulate the milk, add a bit of salt. It's just, this is how people made cheese 8,000 years ago. So I love it. I love that we're starting with this because this is the beginning of cheese. It's a really simple flavor. It's perfectly balanced. I also think that making really great mild cheese is a great skill because you've got nowhere to hide. If you screw up, it's really obvious. So I think it's a glorious cheese and a lovely way to start. I love the texture. It's kind of bouncy, which surprises me. I think
really, I don't want to squeeze your cheese, but I'll squeeze mine.
I wonder if that's
not a cheese.
If I was to pick up a soft fresh goat's cheese, it would be much more moussey. And I think there may be heat. Maybe they heated the milk to a slightly higher temperature. Anyway, I just love it, really. I think it's glorious. Yeah.
Do you think a fresh, mild cheese like this is the equivalent of a lager in beer? And like you said, there's nowhere to hide.
Yeah. Well, I think a lager or any beer, like a session beer, you know, where you're not going for massive flavors, like the old traditional bitters that we used to love before we knew about craft beer, you know, simplicity. Absolutely.
Well, let's, if anybody's still got the Keller Pills going, let's try it with the Keller Pills, because I was torn actually between 3 beers that I wanted to match this with. Bearing in mind, we hadn't actually tried any of these cheeses before when I came up with these matches. So some of them might be wrong, and that's going to be the joy of it. And we'll discover what works, what doesn't, or what we think doesn't, but somebody else does. And the lemony, honeyed thing.
It's worth it, isn't it? Yeah. I'm amazed by the honey note in this beer. I really am.
I need to take you to Germany and take you to Munich and get you trying Paulaner and Augustina and all these beers that have a lovely, lovely.
I would love that, Johnny.
I think the cheese sucks over there, though.
Glorious. The you know, people talk about cutting, and I think they talk about it in beer matching more than other boozers, and they talk about the acidity or the bitterness of the beer cutting through the flavor. For me, the cheese is more acidic than the beer, so the cheese is actually doing cutting of the beer in a really nice way. There's all that sweetness and some maltiness in the beer, and then the cheese with the acidity just goes.
That cheese is beautiful, really, like almost like those milk sweets.
It is like the milk sweet, isn't it? Yeah, it's a fascinating cheese. I'm afraid I know, well, actually nothing. I was going to say almost nothing, but nothing about how they make this. But I am surprised by how firm it is compared to a lot of the soft fresh cheeses I know that are much more like, if you think of cream cheese and then think of that cream cheese being formed into a disc like this, that would have that more moussey texture, and this has more of that springy texture. I'm fascinated by it.
It kind of looks like a panna cotta, doesn't it?
It does look like a panna cotta.
Yeah,
it's so much fun with this cheese, and in terms of everyone buying more cheese, which you all need to do because these small cheese makers are suffering in the current climate. Cheese isn't just for putting on a cheese board. It's not just for posh dinners. And what you could do with this, I love what you said about panna cotta. If you took the whole cheese with that lovely dip in the middle, you could put maybe a little bit of honey on it and maybe a bit of a mace blade or something, and then put it in the oven.
Whoa.
I mean, we think about grating cheddar into a sauce or something, or cheese and toast, but you could take one of these, bit of honey, maybe a bit of some sort of booze, sherry or something, a little spice, and cook that, and that would be like a kind of cheesy panna cotta.
Yeah.
Beautiful colour. I love it.
We've got some comments going on. So the good folk at Paxton and Whitfield are here.
Hello.
They said there's some great German cheeses.
I also like from Angela Cairns, who makes Bigger Blue, saying, "Are you still talking about Coat Hill White? Get a move on." I love it. Hi, Angela's on the 3rd cheese, apparently.
This is wonderful. Usually we drink through 6 beers on our live shows, and it's a race to the finish that Brad usually wins. With this one, it's going to be what will knock you out first, the beer or the cheese coma.
Now, are we going to have this with the Kutch then? Because that was your actual...
So let's go for the actual match. So this is Kutch. This is brewed by Tiny Rebel in Newport, Wales. They're known for their slightly sillier beers. They use a lot of adjuncts, make a lot of silly beers like things called Pump Up the Jam, which is like a sour made with raspberries. Kutch was actually the first ever American hop beer to win Champion Beer of Britain. They're also the smallest brewery to have ever won it. And it's a red ale. It's an American hopped red ale with lots of still quite dry, toasty characters. And I picked this beer because one of Ned, having never tried this beer, I was going off Ned's descriptions, and Ned said that a substitution could be cream cheese. So I'm trying to recreate here I'm trying to match the lemony citrus of Kutch with the lemony tartness of the Coates Hill. And I'm trying to add toast.
Nice.
That's what I'm trying to do. So we get a cream cheese on toast vibe.
We haven't talked about cheese first or beer first, or how you do this.
Very simple, both.
Yeah.
Take a sip of beer.
I'm quite obsessive. Yeah, I would have a sip of the beer and a bit of the cheese separately, you know, to think about what those flavors are. And then I would have a bit of the cheese and a bit of the beer at the same time, so that I was having both in my mouth, or have the beer slightly after. That's what I do. Lovely, Johnny, lovely.
It almost works with the toasty thing, but actually what it does is just add a nice sweet caramel vibe.
Yeah. The intensity is perfectly balanced. They're not fighting with each other. They're not wiping each other out.
It's almost that honey kind of thing about Ned.
It's bringing out more sweetness in the beer than was there. Yeah. This is another thing I find fascinating about doing this matching, is that sometimes one can bring out something in the other that you didn't notice before. You know, the acidity in the breeze could bring a sweetness out in the beer.
It's, you know, one of my favorite, I can't remember who first said this to me, but I really enjoyed somebody talking about how when you walk into somebody else's house, that has a very distinct smell. And that's distinct because you've never smelt it before, but the person who lives in the house, they never notice it, right?
Yeah.
And that's proof that we smell and we taste according to what we've smelt and tasted before.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this beer tasted a certain way before we added the cheese, and then the context completely changes. So it's like walking into a stranger's house. You've just changed the context around that particular flavor or that particular aroma.
Because I'm quite obsessive, what I really want to do with the set of cheese and beers is that you taste the cheese first, then the beer, and then you taste the beer first, and then the cheese. Which, you know, with 4 cheeses and 6 beers isn't too onerous. But usually in my tastings there's 8 cheeses and it would take all night. But really, if I could, because I think the first thing you taste is going to set your palate up. You know, if it was a particularly acidic cheese, the next thing you tasted would feel like a lower acidity because your taste, you know, you've already been set up. But there lies madness, because we'd spend hours.
I love that you want to take that journey, Ned, and I think that says a lot about you.
Yeah,
you're a journeyman kind of adventurer on a taste mission.
Oh, a journeyman adventurer cheesemonger. I love that. Also, I'd barely get out of the house if I could do everything that I wanted to do.
I've got to say, guys, I quite like the Keller Pills match with that. I like the lemony freshness with the cheese.
Yeah, I loved it.
Maybe more than this. Maybe. What does everyone else? What do you guys think?
The learning process. Let's look into the comments. Anybody who's actually tasting the cheese, we'd love to hear from you. See what you thought of those matches. I just scrolled back and saw somebody saying, "Hurry up." Rob from Hopsy says Callum Island Pale Rider was American hops and won it in I just double checked that 2004. I'll have to check the recipe. I was told by camera that's not the case, but I also very much trust Rob. So, Rob, you could well be right. I like Gorgonzola. What type of beer would go with that? You hold your horses, Gaming Spectrum. We'll get to the blue.
We're going to get to that. Yeah, and you'll be pleased. I like that Paxton Whitfield say always cheese first. That's because they're a cheesemonger. And I like Ryan S says, I put the cheese in the beer and then down it in one. And I love that.
I think really it has to come down to how you'd actually enjoy it if you were just having beer and cheese rather than trying to match them. Yeah. So at the end of the day, it's just going to turn into a mess. Yeah. So whichever way you do it, hopefully. Cool. Well, that's an absolutely mind-blowing cheese. I'm glad that we were very kindly sent 2 of them.
I got 4 of them.
I got 4 of them because of a mix-up by the postie.
Before we go on to the next thing, you told me an amazing, because I've obviously got quite a few of them, you told me an amazing thing to do with them. I'm gonna do.
Yeah.
If we want to let everyone else into, because I thought.
So I would take one of those coattails and I'd put some honey on it, and for some reason a mace blade, but a single blade of mace.
You before you said about garlic. We're going to put garlic on it.
Garlic. Oh yeah, no, that yeah. Well, that's the other thing. Would be to chop up a load of garlic and salt and some parsley, and then whip the whole thing together to make a kind of garlicky cheese sauce. That would be nice.
And then you said whack it in a baked potato.
The other thing, and put that in a baked potato. That'd be nice. The other thing I do is take one of these, put some honey, a bit of mace blade, a drop of sherry or something, stick that under the grill. But the other thing I would do, if you'd really be asked, would be to make some pastry and then wrap the thing in pastry.
Wow.
And put a little garlic in that wrap and then bake that, and that would be nice.
Oh, people would pay for this sort of chat on a premium rate line, I reckon, Ned.
Yeah.
Just Ned and Brad talking about cheese.
Oh, dirty cheese monger. Tell me more.
I mean, if we had enough time, I'd pop out the local independent
before it slides off the plate, which I love.
Yeah, that's a good
Rob, we're going to have the Doddington next. You have to just hold the St. Jude together. Just hold it together.
Just cup it.
Yeah.
We just had a super chat entry. So thank you very much, Ben Dawson, for your kind tip. If anybody wants to throw us some money to say thanks for hosting this, for all the content that we make. If you don't know our content, click subscribe below. But you can chip in a little bit of money and your content, your question will get highlighted. So thank you, Ben. So I'll ask you a question straight away, and it's a question for Ned. What is the best palate cleanser between cheeses?
So I'd be facetious and say some more beer, but that's silly. Water to cleanse the palate, but also a really neutral cracker, like a Jacob's cracker. If you're being really serious, if you're tasting cheese for, isn't that a communion wafer?
What is that, Johnny?
That's a communion wafer, isn't it?
Not over a church. What's going on?
So my beautiful girlfriend bought me a load of cheese for my birthday a couple of weeks ago, and I've never seen these wafers before either. But they're essentially the waffle cone of an ice cream, but unsweetened.
I'm sure.
That's right, isn't it?
Ben, water, a neutral cracker, but not a favoured one, because you want to reset your palate. That would be. It's just that Chris Hall said filthy babe talk don't stop, and then Paxton and Whitfield's just said filth. Green apple, absolutely, by the way. Jesus Alcantara said green apple. We do that in when we're judging cheese awards, when you taste 150 cheeses in a few hours, and you really got to reset your palate, and we carry bits of green apple with us. The acidity seems to cleanse the palate. So that would be, if you're being really serious about it. Also sparkling water, as Academy of Cheese says, because that, I think, also the bubbles lift whatever's left on the palate, if you're being really serious. Otherwise, just eat cars, table waters, absolutely, or just eat loads of cheese.
I assume you don't, in beer, sometimes we have to use coffee.
Really?
It's incredibly strong, but it completely ruins the context. So you'll have a bit of coffee and then you have some water, but it just, if you're tasting pale beers in particular, it can reset your palate.
Oh yeah, I don't know that. We can learn from each other. Do you think we should eat some more cheese?
Yeah, we definitely should. Let's move on to our next
Doddington.
I believe we are.
Yeah, Doddington is Soundwave. So here is an absolutely glorious piece of Doddington. So in terms of cutting it, what I'm going to suggest is that you take, this is why I've got my terrifyingly colossal chef's knife here,
good Lord,
is to take a long bladed knife. I find the mirror thing hard to deal with, so that I can cut a nice pie slice off it. So what you want to do is cut nice, like Johnny's done. Look at that. Beautiful.
So we don't do this.
What we don't want to do is what they call in the North snebbing, which would be to cut the nose off. because eventually, if you kept on cutting the nose off, the poor person at the end would end up with just some miserable bit of rind here. I realise I need to do it this moment. Yeah, so don't cut the nose off. That's called snebbing. It's bad. Cut it in a pie slice. Doddington, an absolutely wonderful cheese. Shall I discourse on the Doddington for a minute?
Please discourse on it, and then I will talk about the beer we will be enjoying with it.
Marvellous. So it's made by a woman called Maggie Maxwell up in Northumberland. She says that it's a cross between cheddar and red Leicester, in that it has some of the sweetness of red Leicester with the savouriness of cheddar, and also the texture. If you squeeze it, like I said before, and deal with that texture, cheddar often has a sort of friable, dense, crumbly texture. Red Leicester has a creamier texture, and this texture is somewhere in between the two. The other thing is that Maggie went to learn to make cheese in Holland, where she learned to make Gouda, or authentically Gouda, but that pronunciation is just not Gouda enough.
Was that a cheesy joke there, Ned?
Yeah, thanks. Nice cut, Brad.
Come on.
Yeah.
I mean, look at that. Can I just say the length of my knife compared to the cheese?
Did you do that with that silly short little knife?
Yeah, look at that.
You've done well. Yeah. So what I'm saying about this is that it is like a cheddar in some of its savouriness, some of its beefiness, but it is also like a red Leicester or a Gouda in its sweetness. So it's kind of hybrid cheese. And this represents, to me, something I call postmodern cheese, which is something that started happening in the 80s or 90s when people started inventing novel styles of cheese by mixing different genres of cheese. So Maggie Maxwell, for me, is a postmodern cheese maker.
So Ned, how does a red Leicester get red?
It's a dye. Traditionally, they would use annatto, which comes from a South American thistle. It's totally inert, it has no flavour, and it's just there to dye the cheese red.
Why would you want red cheese?
I am glad that you asked me that, and I do want to discourse on it. But should we eat this cheese? Oh no, I'll talk about red Leicester.
No, we've been eating it for the last 3 or 4 minutes while you've been talking. So you could eat.
It's really weird how little cheese I eat as a professional cheese person, because I'm always talking.
Yeah, we hardly drink at all.
Yeah, of course. So the reason that people dyed cheese is fascinating to me, and it is historical. In the old days, in the Middle Ages, we weren't very good at feeding our cattle. So in the winter, they didn't get much feed, and the milk that you got from them was thin and not particularly full of fat. And so the cheese that you got was kind of white, hard, not all that creamy, not all that tasty. So cheesemakers started dyeing their cheese to make it look as if it was summer cheese. And originally they used something called ladies' bread straw, which had that orange yellow color. And then when they discovered America, it was already there, but the Westerners discovered it. They found this thing, annatto, which grows in South America. So the dyeing was a kind of marketing thing. Can you make the rest of you come back? Because it's just too weird just talking to myself.
Just talking to yourself.
Yeah. So what I love about this is that so basically the dyeing of cheese was a sort of dodgy marketing practice. And I love that people are doing dodgy marketing from the Middle Ages till now. When Cheshire started to really pop in the 17th century, and it was even bigger than cheddar. It was just the cheese, and people making fortune. The Welsh cheesemakers just over the border are a bit jealous, and their pasture wasn't quite as good. So apparently they started dyeing their cheese to make it look like Cheshire. So the dyeing historically has been a bit of a dodgy marketing practice. Now it's just become a sort of tradition. So I'm not saying that red Leicester is dodgy or Cheshire is dodgy. It's just historically that was why they did it.
So red Leicester, does anyone produce red Leicester minus the red? And is that just called Leicester? That's a no. Obviously.
I've never heard Neb.
No, I'm so speechless because Brad, I've done so many of these cheese tastings, and people ask me all sorts of questions that blindside me, and that one has blindsided me more than any other. I have no idea whether there is a cheese just called Leicester, but I do know a cool thing about Cheshire, and the reason why Cheshire is pink, and it is because it wasn't pink, but they started selling it into London, and the Londoners were used to this rubbish Suffolk cheese called Suffolk Bang that was devoid of fat and was pure white, rock hard, tasteless, and wasn't very nice. Cheshire is white, not because it's devoid of all those things, but because of a certain way that you make it. It's still lovely and lush. But in order to get London people to buy the cheese, they had to dye it. So Southerners want Cheshire that's dyed. Northerners want white Cheshire. This is still true because the Applebee's who make Cheshire now have to make one dyed for the sort of southern market and one still white for the northern market.
So hang on, what colour is it in the north?
It's paler.
So did you say pink? It's not pink.
Well, it's Cheshire. If you look at Applebee's Cheshire, let's call that sort of sunset orange pink.
Wow.
But there is Applebee's Cheshire, identical in flavour and everything, that is just white.
So it's a pure marketing thing to differentiate themselves from the shit cheese that was coming from elsewhere.
It was, but only back then in the 17th century. Yeah.
Wowza. And it's just tradition now, so it's just carried on.
Sort of, but this is so beautiful. It still works because I was serving up some Applebee's Cheshire, which I consider to be one of the great cheeses of the world and a glorious traditional Cheshire. I was serving some up at a dinner party, and one of my friends went, "That's not Cheshire." And I sort of said stuff like, well, I am a cheesemonger, and yeah, it is. And she's like, no, Cheshire's white, and she's from Chester. Oh. So it still pertains, that division. Cheese is history. When you eat cheese, you're eating history.
Well,
Donington. And what's the beer?
Yeah, this is a cheese and beer matching, not the history of colour in cheese.
Yeah. That was fun, though.
So we are drinking Siren Soundwave. Siren, one of the, I guess, the granddaddies of craft beer in the UK. One of the most experimental as well, or certainly used to be producing incredible barrel-aged beers right from the start, including their blended barrel-aged barley wines. This is their core IPA called Soundwave. We had a question earlier about whether what you would match with a New England IPA. Which is incredibly hard to do because New England IPA, whether you love it or hate it, is it's not very friendly for food. It's incredibly intense, incredibly sweet, full-bodied, low-carb, all these things that you don't necessarily want with most foods. Soundwave used to be a West Coast IPA, right? West Coast IPAs are the bitter, piney, resiny, grapefruity beers that we, 5 years ago were drinking lots of. Slowly over the years, Soundwave has moved further and further east over to the New England side, which is the juicy, less bitter ones. So I am a great, great lover of IPA, West Coast IPA with mature, hard cheeses. Yeah. So that's why I put this together. I think this match kind of works, but I actually think that Soundwave isn't quite intense enough for the cheese because it's not actually got that much bitterness. So the lack of maturity in cheese and bitterness in beer are wonderful friends. They just smack you around the chops. They make your mouth water. It's very, very exciting. It gets your synapses firing. Just that combination of deep aged cheese and big, bold alpha acid kind of bitterness. And this one's lacking a little bit of that punch.
It's so interesting. It's nearly there. And the beer was so lovely when I had it without the cheese. With the cheese, the beer flattens. And I want it to have just a bit more bitterness or something.
Yeah, definitely needs more bitterness. And lacks a bit of carbonation as well. I think maybe they've toned down the carbonation to give it that thick body for a New England IPA. And it's not great for cheese. It's still a delicious beer. It's just not great.
Well,
it might be great. There's no sparks flying.
No sparks flying. But I love this. So I really like it when you get a rubbish cheese and beer match, because if everything goes for everything, then we're all out of a job. Well, you can carry on talking about beer and stuff, but I'd be out of a job. So I like it when it doesn't work, because then we've got something to talk about. And this nearly works. And it's not that the beer is bad. It's just that it doesn't quite have that thing that pops, like you said.
That cheese is beautiful.
It's gorgeous, isn't it? It's one of my wife's favorite. I've only got one wife. It's my wife. That makes sense, doesn't it? It's one of my wife's favorite cheeses. Yeah.
One of your wives, plural.
Yeah, that would be different, wouldn't it? And I was thinking today, actually, that one tends to, I don't know if you get this with beers, but I have my favorite cheeses and my favorite styles of cheese and things I'm used to doing in tastings. And then sometimes I forget a cheese. And it was only when Imo just went off about the Doddington that I realized just how amazing it is. I really think it's a glorious cheese. Everything is perfect in it.
Yeah, I love it.
Ned, is bringing me back slightly to we did our earlier video, which anyone watching can search on our YouTube channel, when we did a sort of masterclass in beer and cheese matching with you a couple of months back now, I think. We were eating Montgomery.
Yeah,
which this is sort of giving me sort of Montgomery feels.
It has,
because that was my favourite of those cheeses last time round. It was fucking great.
I think you've pulled a blinder. The texture is really similar to Monty's. That's what when my friends would call it Monty's. The texture is really similar. The restraint is really similar in that Monty's isn't a really tear your mouth off cheddar. This has more sweetness.
Yeah,
it has a lot of sweetness, and I think that's what's messing with our beer in a way, is that sweetness.
I wish I hadn't drunk
more bitterness.
If I hadn't drunk all the Kellerbills, I would have tried it with that sort of light sweetness.
Yeah.
Don't worry, I'll do it for you.
I've got some Kellerbills left.
I think the honey vibe will go well. I don't think this will have the bitterness either.
To all our viewers, if you have enough cheese, of whatever cheeses you've got, and I'm sure some of you have got slightly different cheeses that will do the same thing, keep a bit of what you've got to try with the other beers. Just because we said this works doesn't mean the others don't.
And it turns out we're wrong as well.
Yeah, we are often wrong, and I love being wrong. I really love being wrong.
Actually, that does kind of work. Actually, the bitterness in Kellerbills is higher than in Soundwave, which is fucking mad. We've got a German lager that's more bitter than an IPA. I don't want the old man shakes hand loud, but I think IPA should have a bit of bitterness to them.
And that is mad, isn't it? Because I remember Siren a few years back, like you say, being more like West Coast.
Yeah.
Bit, like trad bitter stuff. So
they've shifted it for the tastes of people, and that's probably the right thing to do commercially. But I just hope we don't lose West Coast IPA over here, and we're starting to see a resurgence of it.
Yeah.
I think the colour is lovely. Still not absolutely banging.
Nope. Still not there. However, Carlos Velas IPA would have been great, and it fucking would. Racer 5, one of my favourite beers in the world.
What's that?
Big, tiny, caramelly, citrusy.
Yeah.
One of the original IPAs. One of the how do you describe Racer 5 IPA? Just a cult classic, maybe, is the best way to put it. We were in Santa Rosa, which is where the world famous Pliny the Elder's from. In some ways, I'd have drunk more Racer 5 than Pliny.
That's a big thing to say.
Racer 5 was one of my gateway beers, sort of pretty early on. And when we went there, I was blown away by their. What did it feature in? Did we actually put that out when we went back and we looked at all the stuff that was in barrel?
Yeah.
We did. I can't remember which doc that's in.
We made its own video just all about Racer 5, the Racer 5 brew pub, which tragically is closed.
Mate, that was one of the best tap rooms in the world. Definitely.
Yeah, it was amazing. It closed, I think, just over a year ago, maybe. The landlord jacked up the rent for no fucking reason, and they were kicked out.
Man.
So the brewery, the brand is still fine, but they don't have their original tap room where they were founded, which is real sad.
Question: the
IPA just smells like old socks, or is that just? That's
Really?
not you, Ran. That's bad brewing. Very bad brewing.
Yeah.
They should not smell anything like that. They should smell like juicy fruit chewing gum.
That's funny because when I started going to the pub, which is an embarrassingly young age, way before it's legal, when I drank bitter, it tasted like old socks to me. And it wasn't great bitter then, but there was Green King and Adnams and that. And I think one thing is I had to learn to drink it. You need to learn what the flavours are that you're expecting. But I also think there is a bit of old sock in.
I mean,
maybe a little bit of old sock is not bad.
Do you get any old sock in cheese or an equivalent?
It's a really good question. Maybe not old sock, but you could have undesirable flavours.
Is it butyric acid in?
Yeah, exactly. So I think butyric acid is the excellent example because in some beers, a little bit of that is fantastic.
Butyric acid is baby sick smell, if anyone's wondering. That really acrid, funky smell in Parmesan.
Well, yeah, exactly. So you could say that about Parmesan. You could have that baby sick thing. And it's that thing where a flavour, or Brett is another interesting example. Like loads of Brett would be horrible. A little bit of Brett within the mix of all the flavours would be good. So a thing that we might think of as a fault wouldn't be if it was in the mix of complexity.
It becomes complexity, not a fault.
Yeah. Given that we have gone half an hour over our allotted time, is it all right if I just go and swiftly freshen up and come back?
You go freshen up. That's all good.
Grand.
I'll see you in a minute. We can hold the fort.
Then we'll have the other cheese.
Somebody's drinking a bock with medlar syrup. I don't know what medlar syrup is, but a bock, sweet, caramelly, potentially a tiny hint of roast, but maybe not much. I would go for a nice, hard, but not too mature cheese. You don't want giant, big flavors, but something Comte-esque, maybe. A little bit nutty, a little bit sweet, a little bit honeyed, a little bit mature. That's what I'd go for with a bock. Ned,
we had a question earlier that was, what's better? We should save this for Ned, actually. What's better, Comte or cheddar? We'll save that for Ned when he gets back.
They're my two favourite kinds of cheese.
I know, right? They're both pretty fucking excellent cheeses. What's better? Arm wrestling.
Thoughts on Westcombe cheddar? We'll ask that of Ned as well, but it's fucking amazing. Montgomery, everybody loves. Blimey, we're getting some niche requests for cheese matchings now. Thomas Open just poured a bit of Geneva that was aged on Oloroso casks for 5 years. What cheese would you pair with that?
Oof.
Give us some tasting notes for Ned to work with when he comes back.
I'm back now.
Some ideas. Angela Cairns goes well with the Session IPA from Broughton. Session IPA, that's perfect. It's dry.
Perfect.
You get that aged, not aged hop. You get that citrusy hop characteristic. That's important.
Do you remember that in our last meeting we came up with the idea of session cheese?
Session cheese,
which I'd never really thought of before, but I think there is session cheese as much as there is session beer.
That's a session cheese right there.
Yeah. And a Lancashire or Cheshire or something you can eat a shed load of.
Mine's gone. That's how much of a session cheese that was.
Yeah, stop whining, Brad. You've got 3 more.
You ate the whole wheel of cheese.
Okay,
I love it.
To be honest, my girlfriend is here as well, so she's eaten about a sixth of it.
All right, let's move on to cheese number 3, shall we?
Rob Tyres, we're moving to the St. Jude now.
While you were gone, Ned, we got some pretty niche cheese matching questions, which we're going to come back to. They're going to give us some tasting notes for what they're drinking before we can attempt to match. But yeah, tell us about St. Jude.
Okay, so there are so many things that I love about this cheese. One of them is its name. So it's called St. Jude. It's made by a woman called Julie Cheney, who is one of my favorite cheesemakers in the world. Not just because she makes amazing cheese, because she's just a lovely human being. And she was making Tunworth, a fantastic British take on Camembert, and that went wrong with the business for her, so she had to stop and start again, build everything up from the beginning. So she called her cheese St. Jude, as in the patron of lost causes. It's just a lovely way to name a cheese.
Wonderful story.
The other thing I love about Julie, hey Julie, if you're watching, and I don't know if she still does this, but she used to ladle the curd at midnight. So when you make cheese, you set milk, and then you wait for it to set into a sort of gel, and then you ladle it into molds. And the way that Julie did her cheese making meant, with the timing, that you ladled at midnight. So when I went to visit, what you do is you do all the other bits, lots of washing up, turning of cheese and stuff. You set the milk, then you have dinner, and then you go to bed. And then Julie comes and wakes you up at midnight, and you go and ladle curd. And I thought, oh, this must be some kind of really artisanal thing to do with, I don't know, phases of the moon or something, or some kind of really kind of
biodynamic
reason. Yeah, biodynamic stuff. And I said, why'd you do it, Julie? And she said, well, I'm too busy in the day, so I've set it up to ladle at nights. Not as romantic as I thought. It's so my one. Can you show? My one's a bit doesn't look as pretty. How are yours looking?
Mine was. I've taken it.
Now look at Brad. Move it back a little bit towards yourself. Yeah, look at that. It's so gorgeous.
We can go for Brad.
Yeah.
Bring it in, Brad. Bring it in.
Yeah,
there it is.
The wrinkling. It's the different molds. You've got some geotrichum. You've got some penicillin and candidum in there. It's a perfect balance of molds. These are quite ripe, so they're really soft. A younger St. Jude has a kind of moussey, well, fudgy rather texture to it. It's another of those cheeses that has a lot of balance. It's not really intense. It's just it's quite restrained. It's got some balance. Obviously, I just really love it. Should we eat some?
Let's eat some. I already have.
Have you? So if anyone is, unlike Rob Tyres, has kept their cheese in its box, the way that one can do this is to take your knife and see where the edge of the pine strip is. Put your knife under the edge of that pine, like Brad is doing. Look at Brad. Be like Brad. All right.
Look at it though.
So I put the edge of my knife under that, and I take the strip off. Ooh, gloopy. And most of the cheese remains.
It's coming for you.
Remains on the wooden disc. This one is super gloopy.
Hey,
Brad's done it.
Look at Brad. Yeah, mine's a little bit more moist.
Cheese pro.
Whoa!
No, it's good.
So then, if you had a cheese like Brad's, you could just take that little pie slice out. I'm just gonna basically spoon some out.
That's ambitious, getting a pie slice out of one of these bad boys. I remember last time.
When they're younger, they're more like a fudgy, firm texture.
And now they're a bit goopy.
What are we having now?
The beer that we're going to match it with is Modus Operandi by Wild Beer Co. So Wild Beer Co. to any cheesemongers might be famous because they are based in the same site as Westcombe Dairy. This is Modus Operandi. So Modus Operandi is a Flanders Red style beer. So Flanders Red, obviously from Flanders in Belgium. The style is essentially it's a red ale, a brown ale kind of style. So it's a beer with some caramel notes, some nutty notes. And then what they've done is they've aged it in giant red wine fooders.
Yes.
So in those giant oak fooders, you've picked up Brettanomyces, which actually means the British yeast, but it's mostly associated with Belgian beers now. But it tastes like farmyard. scrumpy cider. People say horse blanket. I've never even seen a horse with a blanket, to be honest. It's a nice image, but I don't know what a horse blanket is.
I mean, I know what you mean, but having never seen a horse with a blanket, I still know what horse blanket tastes like.
Yeah, it's one of those descriptors.
No, yeah. It's
so they combine these bready, funky flavors with some red wine tannins, some caramel, maybe some red grapey kind of notes, but also a hint of acetic acid. And acetic acid is how you make malt vinegar. So acetic is a bacteria that sours the beer, makes it taste a little bit like vinegar. Combine that with caramel from the red ale, and what you get is balsamic vinegar. So this actual style is a little bit less sweet than many of the Flanders Reds and a little bit more Bretty. So I was hoping the Brett would go with the funkiness of the St. Jude. The balsamic acidity would cut through the gloopy or fudgy creamy breeness of the beer, and we'd be left with similar intensity and a bit of cutting from the cheese this time rather than cutting from the beer rather than from the cheese, which we had with the first match.
Yeah. Oh, also, before I even do the match, that thing of balsamic vinegar, that's something I would do, particularly with a young St. Jude. I might pour some balsamic vinegar on it, and you might do that with other sorts of cheese. So that already seems like a great idea. I just love Rob Tyres going, see? Yeah, mine's just gone full gloop. I couldn't throw that on TV. Which is too obscene. Jonny, that's absolutely marvellous.
You enjoy that match?
Oh, that's wonderful. That's so wonderful.
That is a joy.
Everything good. It's doing the cutting, the acidity, the acetic element is doing the cutting, and it's got that fruit.
And that's perfect because again, I noticed it's quite a funky, unusual beer. Put it with the cheese, and what you've got is a session cheese and a session beer. Neither of them are really session cheeses or beers, so it rounds them both out and makes them really approachable and balanced, even more than they were to start with.
Sometimes I feel like the cheese can tame the beer, or the beer can tame the cheese, in a way that this is doing. And obviously, modus operandi is not remotely a session beer, but somehow with that all coming together, that's just really mellowing everything out. It's absolutely glorious. That was fantastic.
Good. We've had a big win. We've had a medium, we've had a fail, and we've had a big win.
It's interesting as well. So my St. Jude has now turned to liquid on my board, and what I usually build
that wouldn't happen.
I can try, but Rob Tyres will love this. Yeah, total liquid. See, okay.
I'm still hanging in there. Your house is obviously intensely hotter than mine.
Yeah, liquid. Oh, stopping now.
Wow.
Have to lick my fingers. One thing I love about cheese is that cheese is willful. So cheese does what it wants to do. So you can set up this tasting where you go, yes, the fudgy St. Jude with its firm texture and its delicate flavour. And then on the night, you get a completely mental dude that's absolutely liquid. And I love that about cheese.
So what you're saying is
exciting.
Cheese will find a way.
Yes, that. Absolutely.
Right, Brad. Craft Beer Channel merchandise. How good a cartoon can you do of your man from Jurassic Park?
Jeff Goldblum?
Yeah.
Looking all sexy.
And then saying cheese will find a way. Because I think he'd endorse that.
He would endorse
that. Speaking of merchandise, you can buy our glassware at Beer Merchants.
They're lovely glasses. Thank you, by the way.
You're so welcome.
Aren't they nice?
You can also buy our books and our T-shirts on the YouTube channel as well. So do check that out. And do, if you fancy throwing us a tip, do a super chat. We don't care what it says. Could be abuse. But do that if you have if you have time or the money. I realise, obviously, times are tough. We've got some questions, Ned. Are you ready?
Yes, I'm so ready.
Okay, no, these we've got a beer question. So one is, what is that ABV around 10% range? No,
Wild beer.
6 or 7 generally, and this is
7%.
so at the top sort of range of that. Rob Hobzine asks whether a horse blanket, maybe it's a horse duvet or a horse
I
sleeping
like that. I like that. Yeah.
What's the idea of a horse sleeping bag? Does it have like 4 legs and then
a hole for its head as well? 5 holes.
And for its butt,
with the tail.
you wouldn't want its butt contained in a sleeping bag.
This is not really germane to the whole cheese and beer tasting thing, though, is it?
No. Go tangent. This is Brad territory right here.
somebody in the comments has a CBC glass. Yeah. Thank you so much for chipping in. I hope you've got many tasty beers to come in that glass. I'm just going to scroll back a little bit, see if there's any more questions. No, guys, we're getting a bit quiet in the comments. Maybe you're just really enjoying the phone line chat from Ned.
They're overcome by the gloriousness of the cheese, and they're a bit pissed.
The works well with their neighbour cheese, Baron Bigod.
By God, Baron by God.
By God.
I mean, I haven't heard Jonny and Dulcie pronounce it, but I would pronounce it Baron by God. He was Baron by God was Norman Lord who ran that part of Suffolk. That's what they named the cheese after.
Question for you, Ned. Top 3 supermarket cheeses I can get during lockdown. I really want cheese.
Boffaroni, don't go to supermarkets. Is my first answer. It's really easy to buy cheese online. It's becoming increasingly easy because all these cheesemongers are selling online. And this is not a push of my thing, but on my website there is a list of cheesemongers from all over Britain and Ireland where you can buy cheese. The cheese is vastly better when you get it from a smaller shop, the kinds of cheeses we've got here.
What about, where's the best place to go to get various different cheeses? So that you're not having to pay multiple postages. There are people that together send it in a bulk.
Yeah. Well, so all of the good cheesemongers have a good range of cheeses. Now, I want to dial back a bit and say that obviously the kind of cheese that we're trying tonight and that you get from these cheesemongers costs more. It does. And if you, I mean, one thing to do is to buy less of it because you will have a more intense experience. When you eat a bit of a block cheddar, industrial cheddar from supermarket, you don't have as intense experience. So pound for pound, in a way, your experience is more intense and more interesting if you buy a smaller bit of the more expensive cheese. Tesco's Finest is not bad at all. I mean, I've had, when I forgot to get cheese, I've gone to Tesco's and got Tesco's Finest Gruyere. It's all right. So you can get some decent cheeses. Look for the slightly pricier ones, the ones with the, like the Finest range, and you'll get better cheeses. Waitrose, if you can get there, they have the better cheeses. Booths is a supermarket chain up north who have fantastic cheese. I know because I used to sell it to them from Neil's Dairy.
The question is coming, so that's good to know.
If you can manage it, give the money to the small independent shops. They need it more than the supermarkets do, and you'll get better cheese.
Amen.
Yeah, man.
Right, got some more questions. Is there a craft cheese channel? Ned?
Soon. Yeah, there is. It's called Cheese Tasting Co. Yeah.
And you can subscribe to that. We'll make sure there's a link in the description box at the end of the show so you can go subscribe to Ned's channel.
And as soon as there's one live how to do that.
Huh?
You can subscribe to it as soon as Jonny teaches me how to do that.
You don't need to worry about it. People do it for you.
Yeah. I also want to say that a cowboy in Sweden says Hugh by God, as I remember it from school. So yes, it was Hugh by God. And if you're really from Sweden, it shows you how amazing Scandinavian education is, because there are plenty of people in Britain who have no idea who Hugh by God was.
I don't know who Hugh by God is.
There you go.
We had a question earlier, which I totally missed, which is, what is the best cheese for fondue?
This could go on for a while.
Good.
So you want traditional Swiss fondues mix several cheeses. So not just one cheese is the first answer. You want something that's going to go all stringy. So you want something like Emmental. We call it cooked curd. So cheddar isn't cooked curd. Emmental is cooked curd. Gruyere is cooked curd. Cheeses that have that kind of melty thing. Lincolnshire poacher, if you want to do a British fondue, will have that cooked curd effect. So there's no best cheese for fondue. Also, as a jazz musician, I would say, why not just play with some cheeses?
Yeah.
Do different cheeses. See what happens. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? You'll have some melted cheese that you put on toast or something. But classically, you would go with something like Emmental or Gruyere that has a stringiness, something like Ogleshield or Raclette that has a bit more funk. Think about flavors that you like and then mix them together. I mean, God, if you want to use Stilton, I wouldn't, but if you wanted to put Stilton in fondue, that'd be amazing, and I'd love you, and I'd come around for dinner. That wasn't very clear, was it?
Bring your trumpet.
So you said, you said that you need like several different several different elements of cheeses in there. So you got the cooked curd.
Yeah.
What are the other elements?
This is really hard, Brad.
Yeah.
So Amsterdam, 420 Amsterdam, who I love, says 3 cheese blend fondue. Yeah. When I've looked at fondue recipes, it's not like they're mixing, there's one cooked curd and one that isn't. I think if I was going to do a fondue, I'd maybe want to have one cooked curd to give it that stringiness, but then I would mess about with other things. When you cook, you don't always follow recipes. And you know flavors of things, so you add something to a dish. So when you're making a fondue, you can think, yeah, I like that Emmental flavor, so I'll get some Emmental. But I love Lincolnshire poacher, so I'll put some of that in. Maybe I'll try some Stilton, or So I'm not helping, am I? I'm saying.
What you're saying is that you want to know what everyone else thinks.
Yeah.
Well, I like
fondues.
Yeah. Everyone, tell us now.
Just get your kits out, fondue kits. Get your fondue kits out, and just start melting cheese. Let's see what happens.
So Chris Hall says fondue equals cheese jazz. He knows me so well.
I just fucking said that. I said you're talking fucking cheese jazz.
Yeah, Chris does that. Mons cheese. We're talking about cheese shops now. Mons Cheese, who are fundamentally French but also sell some British stuff, sell a fondue pack of pre-mix grated. So if you couldn't be bothered to think, that'll make a banging fondue. I know,
the world's gone to hell right now, but at least we still fucking have pre-packed mixed cheese fondue.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's not gone wrong yet, people. And even if we live in caves, there'll be cheese caves.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's my call to arms. Right, should we move on to the final cheese? Because life's too short. So our final match before the wild card. We've been going for nearly an hour and a half, guys. I don't know whether we've got the wild card in.
Half an hour, I remember, was what we were.
I never promised half an hour. You thought it should be. We're going for Bigger Blue. I'm going to start with the beer because I want to give a little caveat here. So finding a place that has all the beers that you need and all the styles that you need is actually a little bit tricky at the moment. I won't go into the ins and outs of the craft beer industry or the beer industry and why it's a little bit tough. But varied beers are a little bit scarce at the moment. So we've got the Dark Arts of Surreal Stout from the wonderful Magic Rock up in Huddersfield, one of the great craft brewers of the UK. They make some absolutely magic beers. But, actually, I might have to remove my caveat.
What was your caveat?
This is just the straight up Dark Arts. Hey! So I thought we had a slightly twisted version that had hazelnuts added.
It says surreal stout.
Yeah, but I believe this is the straight up dark art. So it is just lovely, delicious, big, bold, roasty, chocolatey stout.
I was so glad when I saw that you'd picked the stout for the blue, because that would be what I would pick.
I mean, I feel like it's a bit of a cliche when it comes to beer and cheese matching,
well,
but
it's so good.
Blue and dark, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that would be, of any of my favorite matches of any substance with anything, it would be blue cheese with a stout or porter would just be the heavenly thing. I want to talk a bit, for anyone who's got a colossal piece of cheese like this, about how to cut it. In that, normally a proper cheesemonger, oh God, the thing with the, yeah, okay, there it is. There, yeah. So I would have a cheese wire and I would cut slices off it like this. But when you don't have a cheese wire, I'm going to suggest a way of cutting that some of my cheesemonger friends might now hate me forever.
It's YouTube. You're supposed to be here to create.
Yeah, I'm gonna get some awful load of trolls and shit. What I'm gonna say is, cut that bit of the rind off there. I know this is terrible. Cut that bit of the rind off, and then just cut yourself pie slices off this piece.
Hey, Ned.
Yes,
it's exactly what I did.
Nice. Yeah.
So what you're going sort of against the grain there.
Against the grain. Well, I think it's a bit like hedgehogs and foxes. Hedgehogs only have one way of dealing with stuff, which is to make themselves prickly. Foxes have different ways of dealing. So I would say cheesemongers should be like foxes. See what I mean?
Like a wild fox.
Yeah.
So I'm a fox now. So I'm just gonna. I'm looking forward to the response to this from my cheesemonger fans. But I'm going to say, when you've got a piece of that kind of size and size and shape at home, and you don't have cheese wire, just cut the rind off and then cut yourself triangular slices off it.
So we'd love to hear from Paxton Whitfield, the maker of Bigger Blue, as to whether Ned is now excluded from the cheese community.
Well, High Hops podcast says, "Oh, I love Ned."
He's not wrong. We should promote.
Cutting cheese like that is a criminal offence punishable by death here in France. Yeah.
But would you kill them by taking off the rind first and then taking a pie chunk? Would you sneb a person? The French, they love taking the end piece off of humans.
I think they'd get the old guillotine out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I don't want
just say Ned in capitals, and I'm not sure what that means.
I don't think that's a good thing.
You don't think it's a good thing? You think it's a bad thing?
It's a good thing.
Yeah.
That's shouting in internet, isn't it?
But also, this is lovely, isn't it? I mean, the beer and cheese thing is lovely. The bigger is milder than I expected.
Yeah, it really is.
Also, we were going to have the Errington's Lanark Blue, which is the sheep's milk blue. And if you remember when we first talked, I sent you that list and I said Lanark's really strong and really intense and everything. And then Selena rang me up and said, look, it's really young for Lanark and it won't have that intensity at all. Partly because they're selling so much. So she said the bigger will be stronger. Bigger, if you like. I was so distracted by the quotes. But it's still really mild. I was expecting it to be more hefty.
It's called Bigger.
It's called Bigger. It's just a place, Johnny, not a dimension. It's just a place. But it's lovely. One thing I want to say, actually, about blue cheese. Right, here we go. Yeah. See how there's not that much blue in it. What you want from blue cheese is not the flavour of the blue. It is how the blue interacts with the cheese, how the blue is ripening the cheese. So in this beautifully, perfectly ripened bit of blue cheese, there's not shed loads of blue. It's balanced. And this is an excellently made blue cheese.
So it's
and really much more.
Not what the blues bring in itself.
Yeah, it's the interaction.
I think we went down a really weird avenue before, Ned, when we were talking about like almost like veins of minerals in the earth being like veins of blue cheese, of their precious little things going out throughout the universe and whatnot.
Yeah.
But I remember the Montgomery, going back to that, had blue in it as well, which kind of confused me a lot. And I mean, it was kind of amazing to me that like a cheddar had blue in it.
Yeah. So I'm slightly distracted because Paxton Whitfield have just said we'll have words next time we see you. I think Avril Malloy, who, by the way, hey Avril, is basically the me of she's a great Irish cheesemonger, is saying that she thinks I'm in trouble with Paxton Whitfield. Yeah, it might be cheese knives at dawn or something about how
comments of YouTube.
So Brad's made a lovely point here. It's about finding some blue in cheddar, which you might also find in Cheshire, Lancashire, or any of those territorial cheeses. And what it is in a way, it's the sign of a really authentic, lovely farmhouse cheese that you get some blue in it. And here is the reason. When you make an authentic, I hate that word, a proper good farmhouse cheddar, it's bound in cloth, not in plastic. It's bound in cloth, and they sit in a barn, and they need to be turned. So when you turn them, they get the odd ding because they weigh 24 kilos, and you turn 124 kilo cheeses, eventually you're going to drop one. And when they drop, they get a little crack, and it lets the air in, and the blue mold needs the air to grow, and the blue mold is around everywhere anyway. So you'll get that in those kinds of cheeses. If they're wrapped in plastic, like your sort of industrial cheddar is, it will never have that, ever. So the blue, for starters, is a sign that it is a proper good artisanal cloth-bound cheddar. The other thing is it tastes fantastic. Now, you can get cheddars where the bluing's gone absolutely mental and it's riddled with blue, which is then its own thing, but it's not what you wanted from your Montgomerys or your Pitchfork or whatever.
Is that where someone's rolled it down a hill in a competition to race people?
That shows good folklore knowledge, and in a way, yes. But the other thing I love about that question is the thing about cheese that I've discovered is it's never one thing. It's never one thing. As soon as you ask, like you say to your boss, is it because of that?
Yeah.
And they just go quiet. It's never one thing. So the reason there's more blue in a Monty's is to do with the acidity curve as it was made, or the temperature in the barn, or it's the same with beer, isn't it? I mean, basically, it's magic. I mean, well, we used to call it magic. Now they call it complexity or something. So it's never one thing.
No, it is magic. You're right. It's alchemy. It's something you can't put a pin to. I think Chris Hall's one comment of the night.
Yeah. The Illuminati are coming for me.
Yeah, man.
Strong, isn't it? That's real strong.
Great.
Let's go back through some more comments. Got a couple of interesting comments. What would Gandhi drink? I don't think he would.
Nah.
I think it's teetotal.
Hinduism is not against booze, though. That's so he was allowed to drink booze. I think Gandhi would have drunk a real session beer, something really simple, not with adjuncts, nothing with adjuncts, just malt, hops, water, right? And he would have eaten
the Reinheitsgebot. Right.
The German. Gandhi would have been all over the Reinheitsgebot. Or you would have had some Coat Hill Blues, something really simple. Yeah.
We've got somebody asking about the ownership of Magic Rock, which is a completely fair comment. Magic Rock are now owned by Lion, which is owned by Kirin. So a Japanese brewery who, up until very recently, were very, very ethical. And on the Craft Beer channel, we base our decisions on ethics rather than ownership.
Nice.
Looking at what those companies have actually done, whether they're multinational or not. Lion themselves, I haven't got a mark against their name, but Kirin were found. Well, it looks like one of their breweries was funding a genocide, but it was shut down very quickly.
What? No.
Funding the Myanmar genocide, I believe, was the allegation leveled against them. I need to check in on how that's progressing as to whether that's true. But much like Ned was saying, you can buy Tesco Finest, but you're better off buying independent. Exactly the same thing applies when it comes to breweries. If you don't want to get mired in that that world of working out the ethics of different companies, buy independent, buy small, buy British, buy local, and understand your local businesses as well. Like, local businesses aren't always the best businesses. As American drinkers are learning with their frequently horrible craft breweries. But we'll get into that in a craft beer channel show rather than a beer and cheese one. What else have we got? Guinness macaroni and cheese. Good Lord.
Yes.
I'll go there.
Wherever that is, yes, I want it. Definitely want it.
What's the best New England cheese? Tell me about American cheese, Ned. Have you ever had anything amazing?
Yes, I have. Oh God, what's it called?
Wisconsin's the cheese state, right?
Wisconsin, yeah. What's his name? Mateo Keller. A lovely man. B, an amazing cheesemaker. The thing you want to know about American cheese is that they've been making cheese in America for 400 years, because the people who went over on the Mayflower and on other ships were European farmers, largely English farmers. The first governor of Massachusetts was a cheesemaker. So people bag out American cheese, including Americans. And actually, they have a 400-year history of making good cheese. Yeah, I know, Johnny, but we've got our own problems here.
Even named it American.
Yeah, we've got Cathedral City.
I got out my cheese box in the fridge and this was in it, and I thought it would be funny to not take it back out of the cheese box.
I love the way you're flapping it as well. Flap that.
It's actually a good fan. I'm pretty warm.
So I have a lot of things to say, but one thing, it makes me sad. One thing that happens when you're a retail cheesemonger is you get American customers and they say, not always, but they say things like, oh, well, we don't have any good cheese in America. And I think, yeah, you do. But they don't know, because it's such a huge country that you've got fantastic goat's cheese makers in California. I mean, the people in Vermont, Wisconsin. But it's so big that's not going to appear in a farmer's market in New York necessarily. So they do have good cheese there.
Somebody saying Hardwell from Vermont.
Yeah, I don't know it. And I want to know it.
Is there a correlation between the best beer in America? Well, a lot of the best made beer in America in New England.
I see where you're going, Brad. I see where you're going, and I like it.
And potentially.
Areas. Do you mean like they make good cheese in New England, so they make good beer there?
I mean, Vermont is very famous for its local ingredients, its local produce, and its local producers. They make some of the best American-style beer in the world.
Yeah,
some of the best cheese in America, or indeed, therefore, in the world.
As a recovering philosopher, that I have no short answers to questions like that. So.
I mean, you've got to answer it at least. You've got to say something.
I know, right? It'll take me a moment. So, people have been making cheese in America for a long time. They've been making beer in America for a long time. The craft beer movement started in America, didn't it? Way before here. I mean, my God, I just read this thing about something in the 70s with them making beer there, when we were making Watley's Red Barrel here or something awful like that. I also think that there's, in a weird way, a virtue to losing your culture, food culture, so that you have to re-find it. And I think that happened in America. I know it happened here because I know about it. So you take cheese. We lost almost all of our traditional cheese making. So in the 70s, people started making cheese again from scratch, borrowing recipes from the continent, inventing new recipes. And so they came up with a really vibrant cheese-making culture. You could argue that on the continent where they kept their peasantry and their traditional methods, they're a bit stultified and frozen. And in America, they got that in spades because they came there with a new culture anyway. So it's no wonder to me that the craft beer movement, it seems to me, comes from America. And I think cheese making, in a way, we do it here. We make novel varieties of cheese. They do in America. And I think that that's a virtue. I'm sure there's absolutely smashing cheese in America.
So there's something to be said for not having a tradition.
Yeah.
And
or
like
losing it. Yeah. Either not having it or losing it.
Yeah.
Look at coffee. The new wave of coffee making came from the New World, from Australia and from Seattle, where they started really thinking about coffee. And then suddenly there's this amazing. You remember? Oh, you guys are too young to remember, but coffee used to be really shit. Yeah, I think it's like that. I think there's a virtue to that.
It's a well-known thing in biology that extinction events result sometimes in the prevalence shortly afterwards of much stronger,
like of humanity.
Yeah. Exactly. So, you know, at the moment, I've been writing a lot of stories for Good Beer Hunting and different websites around the future of beer. And after all the bad news you have to give about it, breweries, pubs, bars are really struggling.
Yeah.
There will be opportunities afterwards, or like forest fires with the, the newly fertile soil that comes afterwards. It's a brutal way of looking at it, but yes,
a brutal way of looking at it. But you're right. Yeah. Yeah,
as dreadful as you can be in today's world.
And the other way of thinking, I mean, this is a bit different from you talking about American cheese or American beer, but what I learned from researching the book is that we've been through troubles before, like the Great Plague or the Civil War or World War II or something, and culture is resilient. Cheesemakers are resilient. We deal with it. We move on. We and it even is creative in its way. I think that one of the great stars of British cheese came out of the plague. In its way, yeah. So,
what was the star?
Well, I think that this is a bit of a spoiler for my bit from tomorrow, but what happened is that in the Great Plague, lots of people died. So that meant that there was a lot of land. So land was cheap, and also labour was expensive. So all these people who couldn't afford to buy land and could afford to buy land, and their labour was rare, so it was, they got paid better. So they became farmers as opposed to serfs or villeins, and then they needed to make money making produce, so they made their cheeses bigger and differently, and you ended up with new styles of cheese.
Amazing.
There you go. Guys, so this was originally
like 3 times as long as we're supposed to do it, isn't it?
Ned was saying half an hour. I knew that was nonsense because, well, you've met me and Brad. So we're going to start winding it up. We'd love, you've got one last opportunity to ask any questions, whether it's about beer, cheese, life, relationships, sure. So take the opportunity to ask some questions. We'll start answering those in a second. I'll just say before we disappear, or before we start tackling those questions, that you can now subscribe to Ned's new YouTube channel. We'll put a link in the descriptions below.
That's right.
You can also just search the Cheese Tasting Co. What kind of stuff are you going to do on there, Ned?
I'm going to eat cheese in front of you.
You're going to say
I'm going to eat cheese. I'm going to eat cheese and drink stuff, and I'm going to get people on like you, and we will eat cheese and drink stuff together and talk about it.
Well, I'm surprised.
Does that sound good?
Is it great to me? It sounds terribly dirty. Is that behind a paywall or?
No. I'm all about free information. Must be free.
Right? Information's power. Give the power to the people.
Yeah,
and I hope you get out there and show us the cheese making as well.
I will show. Yeah. We'll do that. We'll do some traveling about.
We can cross pollinate.
We can cross pollinate.
There's some beer washed cheeses, right?
There are.
So we could delve into that dirty, delicious world. So yeah, please do follow Ned on his new channel. Please do buy his book as well, which he talked about at the start of this. It's a wonderful book. He's going to show it one more time.
Cheesemongers History of the British Isles, available in all good bookshops and cheesemongers. But this book doesn't go off, and it'll be around for ages. So buy more cheese first, and after you've bought cheese, you can buy my book.
There you go. If you are not a subscriber of the Craft Beer channel yet, please do hit subscribe down below as well. All of our content, we don't just review beer in our bedrooms. We talk about, we travel around all over the world, America, China. Where else have we been, Brad? We've been to the Arctic Circle in Norway. We've been to the Czech Republic, Germany, France, Belgium, Spain. Just finding the best beers, interviewing the people making them, cooking, brewing collaborations, all that kind of stuff. So please do join us on that adventure. And we have books as well, which you can buy at beermerchants.com/craftbeerchannel, where all of our merchandise, our books, our glassware are. Let's see, have we got any more questions?
What do I think of Shropshire Blue? It's good. It's firmer than Stilton. Also, it's got a really interesting story to it. And I don't think there's time here, but Shropshire Blue, in a way, was invented in Scotland. So that's what I think about that. Yeah. You have to read my book to find out.
There you go. In Norway during COVID-19, there's been a blooming of farmers markets. So I've had some great cheeses. Have you seen the same in the UK?
Thank fuck they didn't close the markets down. So whether or not there's been a blooming, what's great is they didn't shut them down and people were able to do this. So I think there has been. I don't know the numbers, but in general, I think people are realizing that they can go to independent shops and markets and get as much food as they ever did from supermarkets. So in that way, yeah. Yeah,
hopefully there's going to be a little shift that way. The next beer sampling session, James asks, do you mean the live one? We're going to be doing another one either next Friday or next Saturday. I forget what we agreed. There will be a beer box that you can buy to drink along with that one. We've just finalized it. It went live this morning. So you've got a week to get hold of that, and that will go live. Sorry, that will put a descriptions link. Jesus, the beer's getting to me. We'll put a link in the descriptions below after this, and you can buy it there. And it'll either be Friday or Saturday. I forget. Me and Brad will sort that out afterwards. Not a question, but I want to thank all you guys for your fantastic videos. I've been getting a lot more into beer lately. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the kind words. It means the world when people enjoy our stuff. We had a really tough first couple of weeks in lockdown. Like, people weren't watching our stuff on YouTube because they were rightly watching the news, just rolling in. And actually, we're doing really well at the moment, and that's all down to you guys. So thank you so much. Thank you so much to Gaming Spectrum as well for giving us a little tip there. Glad you enjoyed the stream.
If we're doing thank yous, Johnny, can I do some thank yous?
Of course, go ahead.
So this is part of the British Cheese Weekender, and that's been organised by Pat McGuigan himself, who's an amazing chap, much like me, talks about cheese, the Cheese Academy, and the Guild of Fine Food, and they put this together, and it's fantastic what they've done. So we should thank them. I want to thank all the people who buy cheese, and I'm going to say this tomorrow when I do my bit as well. All of you that are buying cheese from small producers are doing an amazing job, and you've actually turned it around from people thinking they were going to go bust to being all right. The cheesemongers who are working hard and going into work when, you know, they'd like to be isolated are knocking out the cheese for us, and the cheesemakers. So who are still making cheese.
Yeah, so thank you. And the same goes to all those people buying beer. Keep buying from the breweries that need it, and keep supporting small businesses that, you know, create so much of the culture that we really love. We've got two final questions we're going to take. We've got one cheeky question about Saint Agur. You got any on that?
It's creamy. I like it. It's what I like about it is the balanced blue. Remember I said that about the Am I going to get this right? Yeah, not too much blue in it. Very creamy. It's a bit more of an industrial cheese, but it's still good. Yeah,
I like you get the same voice that we do when people say, like, what do you think about Guinness? You're like, well,
things
well made, it's balanced.
like my mum used to say, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything.
She's a wise lady. And
You're supposed to stay silent because we're all full of hate. Never mind.
I get it.
Right, we've got two final questions, and then we're going to say goodnight. The first question comes from the pun extraordinaire himself, a fundamentalist, if you will. Ned, when did beer and cheese become a thing for you, and did a specific pairing open your eyes?
It wasn't. It was Chris George. Chris George is one of the hero mongers. And Chris George, Chris Hall, who is asking you this question, has worked with Chris George on my cheese tastings. I like to have as many Chris's as I can when I'm doing tastings. But Chris George always knew a shed load about wine. And I remember at some point in the early 2000s, he started to talk about beer. Before I'd even tried it, he was saying, no, you know what? Wait a minute. It might be beer. So it wasn't a specific pairing. It was just Chris starting to say, maybe it's not just wine. And then he started saying, maybe actually it's better. And that's what I remember. Even before I'd had a pairing was him saying that.
Okay, and the final question is from Tom Bouchard. Favorite French cheese?
Oh, man. Really? Can I have three?
Yeah, all right. We've got time.
Yeah. Beaufort. So everyone loves Comté, right? And Gruyere. That sweetness, that creaminess. Beaufort is the sweetness and the creaminess to the max. So Beaufort.
I'm going to find
1924, which is the most passively aggressively named cheese in the world, because before 1925, you could make Roquefort from any milk, like from goat's milk or cow's milk or sheep's milk or whatever. And in 1925, the Roquefort producers managed to make this thing that you can only make it from sheep's milk. But traditionally, you make it from any milk. So there's this cheese, and it's made from a mix of sheep and cow, and it's called 1924. And it's absolutely delicious, perfect balance, but also it's just the Passag name. I love that. So that's two, right, isn't it? Really good brie, just really good proper brie with pickled onion monster munch. So brie 1924 Beaufort. How's that?
There you go. Super, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Ned, for all of your wisdom,
Thanks,
insight,
Jonny and Brad.
and rambles. That was absolutely fantastic. If you haven't seen the video that Ned, Brad, and I did together at the Beer Merchants Tap a couple of months ago, there'll also be a link to that below, so you can watch that, where it's 17, 20 minutes of us just nerding out about beer and cheese and having some really weird moments of serendipity where he got a rubber herring from the same place that one of the beers came from, but had no idea.
Spoiled it. You couldn't have told them about the rubber herring.
Yeah, it's a minor spoiler, but it's going to keep them going to the end so they can see it. Otherwise, please do subscribe to both our channels and obviously buy independent beer. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you guys have an amazing rest of your beer weekender. See you soon.
Outstanding. We've all done very well. Cheers.